He's the head of fiscal affairs for the IMF. This is one of the great days in economics. There's the blue book, there's the green book, and there's the brown book. We're talking brown book here. Go to imf.org. It's always interesting reading. We welcome Carlo Cottarelli. Dr. Cottarelli, good noon to you.
Hi, how are you?
What is different about the Fiscal Monitor now from January's summary that you did? What's changed in the last 3-4 months?
In the last three, we don't see major changes, but we see major changes with respect to the outlook 6 months ago when we had our major issue of the Fiscal Monitor, the fall issue of the Fiscal Monitor. And what we see that is different, which confirms the preliminary trends that we saw coming up in January, is that fiscal policy in advanced countries is managed in a quite a different way between, on the one hand, the United States and Japan, and on the other hand, all the other advanced countries. Most advanced countries, yes.
Well, I want to bring up this note, Carlo, and I want you to comment on it because it's right where you are right now. Shifting gears, tackling challenges on the road to fiscal adjustment. The United States is the only large advanced economy aiming at increased adjusted deficits this year despite a narrowing output gap. The U.S. is really alone in this, aren't we, in the way that we're approaching our fiscal affairs?
Yeah, as we say, Japan has also a mild approach to fiscal adjustment. Most of the adjustment takes place in 2012, but the United States is the main advanced countries in which there is actually net of cyclical effects an expansionary fiscal policy in 2011.
Carlo, is the IMF endorsing austerity? When I read your executive summary of your some 150-page report released today, it seemed to me that there's a real statement here that if we've got to choose a fiscal solution, austerity is the way to go. Do I get that right?
I don't know whether austerity is the right word. What we argue is that there is a need for a fiscal adjustment that needs to be gradual. So we don't call for a front-loaded fiscal adjustment, except in countries that are already under market pressure. But it is an adjustment that needs to be clear over the medium term with clearly specified measures. And unfortunately, this has not yet happened in many countries. Some countries, most countries have specified plans for fiscal adjustment. Some of them have also clearly identified how to achieve the targets, but only a few have done this in the medium term. It is, however, clear that this year, with the exception of Japan and the United States, most countries are already, at least for this year, identified the measures and are tightening fiscal policy this year.
Within your very sophisticated work by your team of PhDs at the IMF, do we see, quote, fiscal adjustment, unquote, from increased taxes and decreased spending? Or can we have it the way Grover Norquist wants it, all on the spending side?
It depends a bit on the country that you are considering. The general approach that we have is that for countries that already have a high spending to GDP ratio, a high tax to GDP ratio, the adjustment would have to be mostly on the spending side. We also, however, acknowledge that another important factor is the size of the adjustment. For countries like the United States, where the adjustment needed to bring down the debt to GDP ratio to, say, where it was before the crisis, which is about 60% of GDP for the general government. For countries like the United States with a large fiscal adjustment, it's difficult to have all the adjustment on the spending side. Some revenue increases will also be needed.
Let me get you in trouble here, Carlo. I know you've got 15 people listening to this interview trying to keep you out of harm's way. Here's Carlo Cottarelli from a number of months ago. Let's bring this up. This is a very difficult statement. The Fiscal Commission in the United States did a wonderful job to come up with a comprehensive and sound proposal on how to reduce the deficit in the medium term. You wrote that a number of months ago. Were you disappointed that the United States did not embrace the Commission's recommendations?
What is clear, we know very well the United States has a lot of credibility, and therefore there is time to implement the fiscal adjustment. I'm not disappointed now. I would be disappointed if at the end of of the process, I would not, if I didn't see the adjustment to take place. The U.S. government has clearly indicated the intention to tighten fiscal policy significantly in 2012. So we are waiting to see the identification of the measures that will be needed to implement this fiscal adjustment in 2012 and the following year. So I'm not yet disappointed, but I hope to see some clarity soon.
Let's bring up chart 7. I want to show the immediacy of this, folks. We've shown this a number of different ways. It's just the debt explosion in the United States. And I just simply said suddenly larger. This is marketable public debt pushing out to $9 trillion. Do you agree, and do your research economists agree with Rogoff and Reinhardt that 90% of GDP is that tipping point?
No, we don't have a threshold of this sort. We have looked at this issue of the relationship between public debt and growth. We actually see some negative effects of high public debt on growth coming up also at much lower levels of the debt to GDP ratio, something like 30–40% of GDP. You already see some effects. It is true that the effect is increasing, but we don't find in our study a specific threshold.
I'm curious of your thoughts on the need for crisis to jumpstart the debate over fiscal politics. Do we need a crisis of 100 basis points up in the 10-year? Do we need a 4.8% 10-year note to jumpstart a legitimate debate in the United States?
Hopefully not. I see the debate. The debate is definitely already ongoing. I hope that, so there is no need to jumpstart the debate. There is a need to start the fiscal adjustment in a clear, gradual way, but clear over the medium term. Hopefully this will happen before interest rates start rising. There is an opportunity actually now to start the fiscal adjustment while interest rates are still low.
Dr. Cottarelli, let's leave it there. Congratulations on the Brown Book. It's a fiscal monitor of the International Monetary Fund.